Hello and welcome back to the Building HVAC Science podcast. One of our goals, maybe our major goal, is to help create better, more knowledgeable HVAC and building performance technicians, to helping the two professions better understand each other with the ultimate goal of making customers happy in the homes they live in and the buildings they work in. Today's episode, Eric and I talk with Greg Bokan, who's a customer service manager at TruTech Tools. Greg will share some of his experiences from some recent trade shows, talking about the aspects of the crowd, the interest of the people at the show. And we also get into Greg's background, which overlays to the kind of work he does. And he's worked in the trades. He's got some interesting hobbies, which I'll just let that be revealed as you listen to this episode. Greg also concludes with a lighthearted discussion about a long-standing friendship of someone who's been on our podcast a couple times, and you might even know because he's sort of a celebrity. Anyway, let's get into this episode where Eric and I interview Greg Bokan and look at behind the scenes at TruTech Tools, meeting Greg Bokan.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Building HVAC Science podcast. Eric Kaiser here, Bill Spohn over there, virtually, of course. We got some fun stuff to talk about today, Bill. And because of that, we've got a special guest all the way from the TruTech Tools offices, Mr. Greg Bokan, who's our customer service manager. Welcome, Greg.
Thank you.
Good to have you on, Greg. And we were just talking before we started that we have like 25 people working at TruTech, all kinds of different experiences with TruTech and outside of TruTech. And one of the experiences we want to talk about was Greg's attended a trade show recently, the IHACI trade show, the one out in Pasadena. And you've been going for a couple of years. And why don't you share some of the observations that you made when you attended this year?
Yeah, this was my fourth year, I believe. And during COVID, we didn't go that year because it was right around that time of the lockdown and all that. But great show. It's the Institute of Heating and Air Conditioning Industries is what IHACI stands for. It's a really great show. A good portion of them, students, instructors. So we get quite a good attendance this year. Actually, probably of all the years I've been, is probably the best attended. But definitely a younger crowd, and they were looking for some more basic tools they were looking at. But as beginners, that would be normal, I would think. But a very good show.
How about the layout of the whole place? Can you give people an idea? Because some of our audience goes to trade shows, some don't, some go to big ones, small ones. What's the overall expansiveness of this?
It's a pretty big trade show as far as the ones I've been to lease-wise. It's probably one of the bigger ones. We're pretty busy. I didn't really get a whole lot of chance to meander around and go talk to everybody, but I think a good portion of other vendors made it by our booth and got to talk to quite a few people. Eric was there with me, and he got a little more chance to wander around and experience the whole thing. But like I said, definitely a good show, good people. It's cool to see the younger, you start talking to them, you see the gears turning in their head a little bit and the excitement that their new career path is taking them. So it's pretty cool to see that. I like to see that with education stuff.
Absolutely. Like to see somebody else doing well. That's always a good feeling.
Absolutely.
Any particular products like they homed in on that you had there or that you heard about, even if they weren't at our booth?
As far as our table, they were very interested in multimeters. Like I said, I think it's probably what they're learning at the time. Definitely gravitated towards that. And pretty much any show I go to, thermal cameras are always a neat thing to look at. So I think that was probably more out of the gadget perspective that they were checking those out at, and they're looking at the lights. And you were at IHACI with me one year, Bill. You remember everybody with the thermal cameras?
It's a crowd pleaser because it's so visual.
Yeah, everybody likes those.
Speaking of cameras, that's part of your background too. You want to talk a little bit about that?
It is. I was a professional photographer for quite some time. Actually, I took care of my mom, and I quit my union sheet metal job. I was a local 33 sheet metal worker, and in order to take care of my mom, I got a job locally. Just worked at a gas station for a little while I took care of her, and that wouldn't be enough money to sustain you very well. So I picked up photography and worked at a camera shop. But now that that's beyond me, it's weird about photography. The digital market destroyed the industry a little bit. And that's one of the reasons I got away from that. Just anybody that had a $500 camera became a photographer. And as we were talking about film yesterday, I came back from the Kodak film generation, and I was a big film guy, and the digital market changed that quite a bit.
Yeah, so somehow maybe the artistry is lost from it a little bit.
A little bit, I think. I mean, it's actually for a number of years after that, I did business where I would correct. Uncle Joe took the pictures, and they didn't come out very good. And people would come to me, and I would do because I was pretty good at Photoshop, so I do a lot of the Photoshop editing and whatnot.
So there's another topic. Eric, why don't you ask Greg about the one that might create some buzz?
It'll create a little buzz, I'm sure. But you've told me about this before. You've done some beekeeping and things like that and ran a beekeepers association for a while, I think.
That's correct. The Summit County, which would be the Akron area where we're at here. I was the president of Summit County Beekeepers Association, and I was a beekeeper for probably I still am, in a much lower capacity now. It's a lot of work. I used to produce about 1,000 pounds of honey every year, but just with time management and all that and working a full-time job, and I only have 2 hives now. I cut it back from about 20. I used to have 20 to 25 hives, and if you want to go camping on the weekends, I'm a big avid camper. Gold prospector. We camp at our gold prospecting claim. So in order to do my other hobbies, I had to back off of one to make room for the other.
It's a lot of detail, I would imagine, in the beekeeping and also in the gold prospecting. Like there's some techniques you learned. Anything you want to share? Any highlights there?
As far as beekeeping goes, beekeeping is tough to explain because bees are hard to explain. There's a lot of facts about them, but there's a lot of mysteries about them. They're the most studied animal on the planet, yet we know virtually nothing about them. So the rules say that this should happen, and they'll surprise you every time, and it doesn't. So they're just kind of a strange creature, but very fascinating, a lot to learn about them. As far as gold prospecting goes, that would be more of a physics endeavor, the way fluid dynamics work, and where gold deposits is where the water slows down at. So it gives you an idea where you want to look for gold, and then also how you find it with the riffles, create a low pressure behind the riffle in the sluice box, and that's where the gold drops out at. And we're relying on gold being, I think it's 18 times heavier than water. So you're concentrating heavies out of the material. And then once you get that down into a smaller amount, you pan that out.
The concept of gold prospecting, if I hadn't met you, I would have thought that's California or the Yukon or maybe Montana. But where do you do it?
It's in central Ohio, like between Cleveland and Columbus, basically. It's a little town called Belleville. It's actually Belleville is the only town in Ohio that was actually commercially mined during the gold rush. It only lasted for a few years. The cost of production wasn't quite there, so they were probably breaking even, but they weren't making a lot of money profit-wise. But that's the heritage goes back to that, and we're part of it's called the Gold Prospectors Association of America. I'm actually an officer in that group now. I'm basically in charge of what's called Gold Rush Days. So I'm the chairman of the board for the Gold Rush Committee. And what that is our one big event that we have on Labor Day weekend. That's our main fundraiser for the entire year. So maintain our driveway, and we have a 60-acre property that we lease and pay for the porta potties and all the different things that our electrical bill and all those kind of things. Great group of people, and real down-to-earth people, and enjoy the outdoors together. And we've made a bunch of amazing friends through the Gold Club. So
very nice.
So let's talk about IHACI a little bit more. I thought it was a pretty good show, and I go to a lot of trade shows. That's a lot of my job here is traveling and going to the trade shows. It was big, definitely not AHR big. That's on a whole nother level. But I would say there were probably 60 to 70 vendors there, if I had to go down and count, maybe.
That sounds about right.
It was a decent-sized, small convention center, but decent-sized trade show floor. A lot of varied vendors there. Even a number of rep companies that had all of their different brands, but a lot of the brands that we know and sell were there. So it was good to connect with them while I walked around a little bit and learned about some new products and some new things that I think we'll be highlighting on some upcoming episodes as well. So make sure to stay tuned for that out there. But it was a fun show. And of course, Southern California is always nice to visit for the nice weather.
I understand you brought an iPad to the show to help us, the new thing we're doing. To talk about that.
Yeah, we did. That was great, actually. Just traditionally, I was doing it with my phone. And if a customer asks for a price, and it's hard to remember all the different prices for all the different items that we sell. And it was just great, very interactive with the customer. You could show them different tools, different prices, and easy. It was great. It was very much improvement over a phone.
And that leads into, we did do an update on our website last year. It's been over a year now, but I wonder if that helped make it a little bit easier to present things and find things.
Yeah, the website's faster, so that's definitely noticeably faster than it was, and things were popping right up. And at first, we had a little bit of issue getting connected. Eric and I were working on getting connected to the Wi-Fi. It was really slow, but then for whatever reason, it picked up, and it did great the rest of the day after we got it figured out.
Excellent.
Yeah, that was definitely handy. Of course, we can't take orders at the booth. Everything has to go through. If somebody wants to order, they need to do their ordering through a website.
We get asked that quite a bit.
It's definitely nice to be able to show people, because obviously we can't bring all the stuff that we carry out to a show and show it off. We're limited to what we can take on an airplane suitcase, basically. But I don't know, how many SKUs do we even have in our system now?
Like 4,000 active ones.
Yeah. And we stock a lot of that stuff in our warehouse. So it's a lot of products. And to Greg's point, it is challenging at trade shows when people come up and say, how much does that cost? And I'm like, hang on, I got to look because I don't remember.
You've attended a couple of the trade shows. One of the other ones you've gone to for a few years is the Energy Out West. You want to add, compare and contrast that? Because I think it's a different group.
Yeah, it's a very different group. Those would be all the auditors and whatnot. And that's more of they do a lot of seminars throughout the day. And between the seminars, people come through. But very interesting group there for sure. They're very passionate about what they do. Very extremely to see the interest that they have in what they're doing is refreshing, actually.
And even though it says the name of it's Energy Out West, I think there's people that come from eastern states too.
Yeah, I've seen people from Guam, from Maine, Guam. I'm talking to all over the world, really. But yeah, it was a great show, other than it being, I think it was 113 degrees when I was in Austin, Texas, and that was a scorcher.
That's a rough one. They're going to have to use some energy that day to keep the indoors cool.
Lots of it.
Yeah, that's not easy to be outside on days like that.
Well, we got you here from a customer service standpoint. I always think if people know a little bit more about how business runs, they're more easily interface with them. Would there be any pointers you would give to a potential customer if you could talk to them and say, hey, be ready with this or be patient with that, or any thoughts you would lend to a potential customer?
I suppose when you call in or email, have your order number. That would be great. A lot of times you'll call in, hey, do you have an order number? And then they look for it, and it takes a little bit of time to get to, which is not a big deal either, but it does help us as far as customer service to get you moving forward. And other than that, our customers are great. We have great customers. We deal with some great people and good stuff.
How big is the customer service team now?
See, we have 3 people as standard customer service, and then we have our returns department, which would be Jamie over in returns, and then Billy back in our calibration lab would be part of my team. But as far as actual customer service agents, we have 3, and then 1 after hours agent that deals with later day and weekends and whatnot.
Nice. So you've got somebody there. What kind of hours on the weekends for customer service?
I think it's 9 to 3, I want to say it is.
Eastern time.
Yeah, Eastern Standard Time. Mm-hmm.
Nice.
And then the evenings are covered on weekdays too?
Yeah, weekdays until 8 o'clock.
Eastern, yeah. So we cover the 5 o'clock West Coast time.
So we're 8 to 8 is what we end up being, Eastern Standard, right?
That's a nice benefit for our customers across the country so that they can get a hold of us if they need to.
And you've been with us since 2019, as I recall.
Yeah, it'd be almost going on 6 years now.
Yeah, like right after we moved to the new location.
Yeah, time sure flies, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
Jeez.
Any trends you noticed over that time? Now it's 5 years. Anything changing with customers or things like that, or the market or the tools we carry, the tools we don't carry?
We stay fairly consistent, I would say, and we always pride ourselves in our quality tools and customer service. And it's unchanging there, and that's really rewarding as far as being a customer service manager with a company that actually cares about the customer. A lot of places don't. We're quite unique that way, I feel. So
You'd mentioned a little earlier about you worked in sheet metal for a while for a local. Was there experiences you had there that you apply here, or any a tie to the customers? You've walked their walk. Is that true?
yeah, I worked in residential as a residential installer when I started out at a local company here, and then I ended up getting in the local 33, and I kind of had a split role there. I was a union guy, so we would work different jobs, different companies, all that, and I would either be working on very heavy commercial or just sheet metal jobs. So it was whatever was working at the time. I mean, I did big chillers and air handlers for Cleveland Clinic and stuff like that. And then I'd also do decking and siding. If the work wasn't there, I'd go to the decking and siding and do sheet metal roofs and stuff like that on commercial buildings.
Did you ever get to do any work with any of the copper roofs or the copper flashing?
No, I'd like the architectural stuff, not really. But I know some guys did that. And like I said, I was maybe more of a specialty. But I was in, like I said, more in either the very heavy commercial or, like I said, decking and siding. So we did big giant warehouses, siding or roof jobs, or sometimes there was a snow load cave-ins, things like that, and tornadoes. There was a Rubbermaid plant hit by a tornado, and we had to seal up the electrical room. They didn't want all the plastic as injection molding. They didn't want all the plastic to harden in the pipes. So they had to keep the electrical going to keep the plastic heated. That was a scary job a little bit. It was still raining and wet, and big giant transformers are 8 feet below you. You hear them buzzing. You can feel them. They feel that your hair standing up from the electrical in the air. And yeah, you figure if I drop this piece of sheet metal on that transformer, I'm toast. That was a scary job a little bit.
So anybody here is a customer, and when they talk to Greg, he's walked your walk. He's been in your boots.
I've been there, done that.
I like to think that one of our goals at TruTech is like an unstated goal, but we try to make it the least hassle any customer will to encounter the day, because we know the work's not easy in any aspect for any of our customers. So again, the excellent customer service that Greg and his team provide is one of those things which we like to feel we put into place to be the least hassle for any of our customers who might come by. We have a mutual friend, and actually the person that introduced you to TruTech. Who's that guy?
Jim Bergman.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've known him since I was in second grade.
Wow.
We go way, way back.
Any stories you can tell publicly?
Not really, no. Not many.
I do remember one, which is probably public related, but you used to like camp out for like days at a time with them?
We built a log cabin. We were probably 13 years old, 14 years old, and we went out in the woods, and behind his mom and dad's house, there's a big park. We probably shouldn't have been building a log cabin in a park, but we did. It's a huge park. But when we had a tin roof on it, we had a potbelly stove in there and doors and window, and we'd go back there and we'd catch our food. And
you're already mechanics and builders when you were like just barely teenagers.
Oh yeah, it was actually a nice cabin. It wasn't like a fort like a kid would build. We had a tin roof and floor, and it was actually a livable cabin. We spent a good part of the summer building it. We went many years. I think eventually it fell off. We built it right on the side of a sand cliff that went down by the river, and I think eventually the sand caved in, and we dug a cave underneath there. We'd keep stuff in that little cave when we weren't there, and we'd hide that. I think that we undermined our foundation and
learned a lesson there about physics, right? And geophysics.
Yeah, don't tunnel underneath your cabin, and you're better off, right?
That might be the big takeaway from this episode.
Yeah, right.
Don't dig out from under your foundation. Well, it sounds like you went into sheet metal work there early, putting a tin roof on the house too.
Yeah, that was my early sheet metal days there, I guess. We found it out in the woods. We found that sheet metal. And we carried that all through the woods. And I think his dad, Jim Sr., had the little stove that we put out there, but we'd always have like a white gas lantern. We'd light the stove with white gas. We'd put a little tinder in there and throw a little white gas in there and light up.
Poof.
We have a lot of good stories. Actually, we were hunting and fishing friends. We'd go hunting and fishing, and both outdoorsmen, and we always had a lot in common.
And now Jim's into making bacon and roasting coffee.
Yep, right. And actually, I do maple syrup too. So he used my maple syrup and my honey for making bacon, and he would give me the bacon in change, barter for the honey and maple syrup.
Yeah, I don't think anyone from the IRS listens to this podcast, so you're safe there.
Yeah, right.
Very cool. We always like to ask any of our guests, any closing thoughts you want to share, basically about anything we talked about?
I don't know. I love working at TruTech Tools. It is the best place I've worked at. Just great people. I enjoy each and every person here. I enjoy the customers. I enjoy helping the customers. It's you go home at the end of the day and you feel like you made a difference for people. So it's very cool. It's a great opportunity.
Good. Thank you. And we were talking again before we started here, like maybe we'll start like a little series and periodically bring staff on and do like a staff highlight kind of thing. So I'm sure not everybody asks you about beekeeping and gold panning when you get them on the phone, but at least now they get a chance to know that you're richer, more in-depth person, and again, worked in the trade yourself.
I've actually came across customers that somehow the beekeeping came up and they were beekeepers themselves. And I came across a guy that was a gold prospector. I have no idea in my conversations how these come up, but they do sometimes.
Those hobbies, I'll call them, do cross all forms of people that are out there. So very cool. In case anybody wants to get in touch with you after this, can you share your email address?
That's greg@TruTechTools.com.
There you go. 2 G's or 1 G?
1 G.
You're a 1 G guy. Okay.
I'm a 1 G guy.
One on the beginning, one on the end.
Right. Thank
you.
Yeah,
2 G's, right. 2 or 3, right. There you go.
2 or 3, yeah.
Thanks for coming on the podcast today. Really appreciate it. Sharing your stories about the shows and just yourself, your background. And we appreciate you, Greg.
All right.
Take care.
Thank you very much.
Hey, thanks again for listening to this episode of the Building HVAC Science podcast. In full disclosure, the Building HVAC Science podcast is a production of TruTech Tools Limited, and I am the owner of TruTech Tools. The opinions voiced are those of my guests, my co-host, and myself, depending on who's speaking, of course. And if you're in the market for any tools or test instruments, you can take a look at what TruTech Tools has to offer. That's TruTechTools.com. Use the offer code HVACBS for a nice discount. I want to thank you for listening to this podcast. Hopefully you're following, subscribe to it, and you're sharing it. And we're trying to keep you up to date on all the things that are happening in the world of buildings and HVAC science. Thanks a lot for listening today. And until next time, take care.